We didn't break up in the way people expect. There was no final blow-up, no slammed door, no last speech that explained everything. We just stopped trying, so gradually that, for a long time, I thought we were still fine. When I think about her now, it's not the big moments that come back first. It's the small ones. The ones that used to feel ordinary, the ones I didn't appreciate because I assumed they would always be there. Her standing barefoot in the kitchen in the early morning, hair pulled into a loose knot, reading something on her phone while the coffee brewed. The quiet click of the lighter when she lit the candle on the coffee table because she liked the way it made the room feel softer. The way she'd hum without realizing it when she was focused. I remember those details more clearly than I remember the end, because the end didn't announce itself. If you asked me when it started to change, I wouldn't know what to tell you. I could point to a season, a year maybe, but there isn't a single moment that holds all the blame. It was more like a slow leak. Something you don't notice until the room feels colder and you can't figure out why. Her name was Lauren. We met when we were both in that stage of life where you've had enough experience to know what you don't want, but not enough to know what you actually need. Late 20s, almost 30. The age where everyone starts pairing off in serious ways, and the question of what are you looking for stops being playful and starts sounding like a warning. I was tired of dating. Not because I was bitter, just exhausted. I'd done the thing where you pretend you're fine with casual, you pretend you don't care if it turns into something, you pretend you don't mind the uncertainty. But uncertainty gets old. Eventually, you want something that doesn't feel like a question mark. Lauren didn't feel like a question mark. We met through a friend at a small get-together in someone's apartment. Not a party, just a handful of people talking over music that was too quiet to dance to. I remember noticing her because she wasn't trying to be noticed. She wasn't loud. She wasn't performing. She was listening, laughing at the right moments, letting other people be the center. That kind of calm stood out to me. We talked in the kitchen while other people moved around us. It was the kind of conversation that doesn't need an excuse. She asked me what I did for work, and I told her, and she didn't pretend it was more interesting than it was. She told me about her job, and I asked questions, and she answered in a way that felt honest instead of polished. When the night ended, we exchanged numbers like it was the most normal thing in the world. The first date was coffee. The second was a walk through a neighborhood market. The third was dinner at a place that was too expensive for what it was, but we didn't care because we were having a good time and we both wanted to feel like adults. There were no fireworks. No dramatic chemistry that made you feel like you were in a movie. It was quieter than that. It felt easy. I remember thinking, after maybe a month, that she made my life feel less chaotic. Like I could breathe around her. Like I didn't have to fill every silence. We didn't say, I love you fast. We didn't rush. We didn't move in together because of some romantic burst of emotion. It happened the way it happens when you keep spending time with someone until it's hard to imagine not doing that. After about a year, we were already living together in everything but name. She had a toothbrush at my place. Her sweaters were in my closet. There were extra hair ties in my car. When she was at her apartment, she'd still end up at mine most nights, and eventually she said, almost casually, "This is kind of stupid. We're paying 2 rents." And she was right. So we found a place. Small, not fancy. A second-floor apartment with good light in the living room and a kitchen that felt cramped but workable. We moved in on a Saturday, sweaty and tired, carrying boxes up narrow stairs and laughing at how much stuff we somehow owned. That first night, we sat on the floor with takeout because we hadn't unpacked anything, and she leaned her head on my shoulder and said, "It feels weird. Good weird." I remember looking around at the half-unpacked boxes and feeling something close to peace. For a while, it really was good. Not perfect. We had small disagreements. We got annoyed at each other's habits. She hated that I left cabinet doors open. I hated that she never fully closed the bathroom drawer. The normal stuff that makes you feel like you're sharing a life. We built routines. Sunday mornings were slow. We'd wake up late, make coffee, talk about what we needed to do that week. She liked to plan. I liked to float. We balanced each other out. On weeknights, we'd cook simple dinners. Pasta, stir-fry, things that didn't require much thought. We'd sit on the couch and watch whatever we were into at the time. We'd talk about our days in small pieces, like tossing each other little facts, little frustrations, little jokes. If something good happened at work, she'd tell me first. If something bad happened, I was still the first person she texted. When I think about love in its healthier forms, that's what comes to mind. Not grand gestures. just being someone's default. But the thing about routines is that they can become invisible. You stop seeing them as choices. You start seeing them as the background noise of your life. And when you stop seeing something as a choice, you stop putting effort into it. It didn't happen all at once. It wasn't like we woke up one day and decided to stop caring. That's not how people are. It started with a kind of tiredness. Work got heavier, not catastrophically, but enough to dull us. Lauren took on more responsibility at her job, and she started coming home drained. I had deadlines that kept slipping forward, and my patience started thinning in ways I didn't notice until I was snapping at things that didn't deserve it. At first, we handled it like a team. We'd vent to each other. We'd laugh about how ridiculous life was. We'd order in and sit together and let the day fall off us. But then, slowly, we started bringing the stress home and leaving it there. The first noticeable change was conversation. It didn't vanish. It just got smaller. How was your day? Used to lead to a story. A small one, at least. Something about a coworker, a moment, a frustration. Over time, how was your day? Became a formality. Fine, she'd say, already moving toward the bedroom to change clothes. Busy? I'd say, already checking my email again like I couldn't let go. Sometimes we'd have dinner together without really speaking. The TV would be on. Not because we were genuinely watching it, but because silence without background noise felt too exposed. That kind of silence is different from comfortable silence. Comfortable silence feels like safety, like you're allowed to just exist. This silence felt like something we were avoiding. We stopped going out as much. Again, not dramatically. We'd say things like, let's just stay in tonight. And it sounded nice at first. Cozy. Practical. Then staying in became the default. Not because we loved it, but because it required less effort. We stopped planning weekends. We stopped having those little spontaneous moments where you decide to do something just because you're together and you want to. The apartment became a place where we recovered from life instead of a place where we lived it. At some point, we stopped touching without thinking about it. Not the big kind of touch. We still had sex, technically. We still kissed goodbye. We still sat close sometimes. But the casual contact, the way you reach for someone's hand without realizing you're doing it, started to fade. I noticed it the first time I went to touch her back as she walked past, and my hand hesitated, like I wasn't sure if it was welcome. She didn't do anything wrong. She wasn't cold. She just kept walking. And I remember feeling, for a second, like I'd reached towards something and found empty air. There were nights we'd lie in bed side by side, both on our phones, both lit by separate screens. The room would be quiet except for the occasional tap and scroll. Sometimes I'd glance over and see her face in that blue light, expression blank, and I'd wonder what she was thinking. I'd want to ask, are you okay? Or can we talk? Or even just, what are you reading? But the words felt awkward, like I'd be interrupting. So I stayed quiet. And she stayed quiet too. The longer that went on, the more normal it felt. That's the scary part. The way you can adapt to anything. The way you can get used to less and less and still call it a relationship. We stopped arguing. I don't mean we stopped disagreeing. We still had moments of irritation. But we stopped having actual fights. The kind where you bring something up because you care enough to fix it. Instead, we developed a new habit. We avoided. If I was annoyed, I'd tell myself it wasn't worth mentioning. I'd swallow it. I'd let it go. If she was annoyed, she'd do the same. Or she'd make a small comment and then drop it, like she didn't want to open the door any wider. We became very careful with each other. Not in a loving way. In a cautious way. Like we were both holding something fragile, but neither of us wanted to admit it could break. There was a night I remember clearly because it was so ordinary. We were eating dinner at the table. Something simple, maybe tacos. The TV was on in the other room, the sound low. The windows were open because it was warm and the air felt thick. Lauren looked at her phone and smiled at something. I asked what. She said, nothing, and kept scrolling. I waited for her to show me. She didn't. A few seconds passed, and she set her phone down and took another bite of food, like nothing happened. And I remember feeling this small, sharp thing in my chest. Not jealousy, not suspicion, just a quiet realization that she didn't automatically share things with me anymore. She didn't think of me as the person who would appreciate the funny things she saw. She didn't instinctively include me. And the worst part is that I didn't push. I didn't say, show me. I didn't say, why not? I just nodded and kept eating. Because, in that moment, I didn't want to make it into something. And that's what our relationship became. Two people constantly not making things into something. We kept going like that. Months passed. Maybe longer. It's hard to say because when your life becomes routine, time blurs. We still did couple things. We went to friends' weddings. We visited her parents. We posted occasional pictures. People would comment things like, "You two are so cute," and we'd smile and say thank you, like actors after a performance. Sometimes, in those moments, I'd almost believe it again. I'd think, maybe we're fine. Maybe this is just adulthood. Maybe everyone feels like this sometimes. But then we'd come home to the apartment, and the quiet would settle back in like dust. There were little signs, too, that we ignored. Lauren started going out with coworkers more. Not in a suspicious way, just more. She'd come home later, talking about inside jokes I wasn't part of. I started staying later at work, even when I didn't have to. I told myself it was productivity, but sometimes I think it was avoidance. It was easier to be busy than to sit on a couch with someone you loved and feel alone. We stopped doing small kindnesses. Not all of them, but enough. She used to pick up my favorite snack without asking. I used to fill her car with gas when I borrowed it. At some point, those things became rarer. Not because we were mean, just because we weren't thinking about each other in those little ways anymore. The intimacy got quieter too. Sometimes we'd go weeks without sex, and neither of us would mention it. When it did happen, it felt scheduled, almost. Like we were doing it because it had been a while, not because we couldn't help it. Afterward, we'd lie there in the dark, not talking, and I'd feel this strange sadness that wasn't about sex at all. It was about closeness, about feeling wanted. I started to miss her even when she was right there. That's a hard thing to admit to yourself. It feels dramatic, and I hated drama. I still do. I didn't want to be the guy who complains about a relationship that isn't actively toxic. There was no abuse, no cheating, no screaming. So what right did I have to feel unhappy? That question kept me quiet for a long time. One evening, I came home, and she was sitting on the couch with her laptop open, headphones in. She looked up when I walked in, smiled quickly, then went back to whatever she was doing. I stood there for a moment with my keys in my hand, feeling like I'd entered a room where someone else was already living. I asked, "How was your day?" She pulled off one ear cup and said, "Fine. Long." I nodded. "Mine too." And then we both went back to our separate corners of the room. Later, we ate dinner in front of the TV. She fell asleep before the show ended. I turned the volume down and sat there watching her sleep, feeling this quiet ache. I remember thinking, we're becoming strangers in the same place. But I didn't say it, because saying it would have meant doing something about it. And we weren't doing things anymore. We were just existing. The turning point, the real turning point, wasn't a fight. It was a moment of complete neutrality. It happened on a Saturday morning. We were both home. The apartment was quiet in that soft daylight way. Lauren was in the kitchen making coffee. I was sitting at the table, scrolling on my phone, pretending I wasn't bored. She said, casually, "Do you want to go see my sister next weekend?" A normal question. Not loaded. Not dramatic. I looked up at her, and I felt nothing. Not annoyance. Not excitement. Not dread. Just emptiness. There was a time when spending a weekend with her family would have meant something. Maybe not something fun, but something connected. A part of building a life. This time, the thought of it didn't even register emotionally. It felt like an appointment. Like a chore. I realized, in that moment, that I could say yes or no and it wouldn't matter to me. That scared me, because I had always believed love meant caring, even when it was inconvenient, even when it was tiring. Caring is effort. Caring is choosing. If I didn't feel anything, what did that mean? I said, "Yeah, sure." Lauren nodded like she expected that, like it was fine, and we moved on. But something inside me shifted, like a small part of me finally admitted the truth. We weren't fighting for anything anymore. We were just maintaining the appearance of being together. After that, I started noticing everything more sharply. The way she would talk to me without looking up from her phone. The way we stopped saying good night and just turned off our lamps. The way she would ask me something, and I'd answer, and we'd both forget the conversation happened. I started noticing how often I would almost reach for her hand, and then not. How often she'd walk ahead of me in public without thinking. How we'd sit across from each other at dinner like two people on a first date with nothing to say. I started noticing the gaps. And once you notice the gaps, it's hard to stop seeing them. One night, Lauren came home late. Not extremely late, just later than usual. I was on the couch watching something I wasn't really watching. She walked in, kicked off her shoes, and said, "Hey." Hey, I said. She went to the kitchen, poured herself water, leaned against the counter, and stared at nothing for a moment. She looked tired. I waited for her to say something about her night. A story. Anything. She didn't. She just said, I'm going to shower. Okay, I said. She walked past me and disappeared into the bathroom. I sat there listening to the water run, feeling this quiet panic. I realized I didn't know her life anymore. Not really. I knew the outline. Work, friends, family, but I didn't know the details. I didn't know what made her laugh lately. I didn't know what she was worried about. I didn't know what she wanted. And I couldn't remember the last time she asked me anything deeper than, what do you want for dinner? That realization didn't come with anger. It came with a kind of grief, because it meant we were losing something important and neither of us was reaching for it. When she came out of the shower, hair wet, face clean, she sat down on the other side of the couch. She picked up her phone. I could have said something then. I could have said, can we talk? I could have said, I miss you. I could have said, are we okay? Instead, I said nothing. I don't know why. Fear, probably. Habit. The desire to keep things calm. So I stayed quiet. And she stayed quiet too. Days went on like that until, eventually, it became impossible to ignore. Not because something dramatic happened, but because the quiet became heavier than our desire to avoid conflict. It was a Tuesday night. I remember because I'd had a bad day at work and I came home already tense. Lauren was sitting at the table, eating something out of a bowl. She looked up and smiled, but it was small. I sat down across from her. The kitchen light buzzed softly overhead. We ate in silence for a minute. Then she said, almost gently, do you feel like we don't really talk anymore? My chest tightened. The question hung in the air like smoke. I tried to keep my voice calm. Yeah, I said. I've noticed that. She nodded slowly, like she'd expected me to say that. There was a long pause. This was the moment where, in a different relationship, we might have reached across the table. We might have said the hard things. We might have cried. We might have fought for it. Instead, Lauren looked down at her bowl and said, I don't know how we got here. I swallowed. Me neither. Another pause. I waited for her to say, we should do something. Or let's try. Or even I miss you. She didn't. And I didn't either. We just sat there, both aware of something breaking, and neither of us moved to catch it. Eventually, she stood up, rinsed her bowl, and said, I'm tired. Yeah, I said. Me too. And we went to bed like nothing happened. But everything had happened. After that conversation, the apartment felt different. Like the walls had hurt us. Like the silence now had a name. We were polite to each other. Kinder, in a way. Like we were both trying to be gentle because we didn't want to make it worse. But being gentle isn't the same as being close. Lauren started sleeping closer to the edge of the bed. Not obviously. Just enough that there was always space between us. I started waking up earlier and leaving for work without lingering. Not because I was angry, but because I didn't know what to do with the awkwardness of mourning. We became careful with words. And careful words don't build intimacy. One weekend, she said she was going to stay with her friend Megan for a couple days. She framed it like she needed a change of scenery. Like she needed a break. I said, okay. I didn't ask if it was because of us. I didn't ask what it meant. I didn't ask if she was coming back. She packed a small bag. Not everything. Just clothes, toiletries, her laptop. At the door, she hesitated. For a moment, I thought she might say something real. Instead, she said, I'll text you. I nodded. Okay. She left. The door closed softly behind her, and the apartment felt immediately larger. Not emptier in a dramatic way, just quieter, like the air had stopped moving. That night, I made dinner for myself and ate standing up at the counter because sitting at the table alone felt too sad. I watched TV until I couldn't focus. I went to bed early and lay there staring at the ceiling. I expected to feel devastated. I expected to feel panic. Instead, I felt something else. Relief. That realization made me feel sick. Because relief meant that being alone felt easier than being with her. And that meant we were already gone. Lauren texted me the next day. Hey, I'm good. Just needed space. I replied, okay. Take your time. We didn't call each other. A couple days turned into a week. She came back to pick up more clothes. She was polite. Calm. Her voice was soft. I asked, how are you? She said, I'm okay. We stood in the living room like two people who used to know each other. At one point, she looked around the apartment like she was seeing it differently, like it belonged to a different life. She said quietly, this is hard. I nodded. Yeah. but neither of us moved closer. She took her bag and left again. Weeks went by. At some point, we started talking about logistics, about rent, about whose name was on what, about what we would do with the couch, the dishes, the plants she had kept alive longer than I ever could. We were calm, civil, almost too calm. Friends asked if we were okay. I said, yeah, we're fine. I didn't know what else to say, because what do you call it when you're breaking up without ever breaking up? There was no story to tell, no villain, no betrayal, just two people who slowly stopped choosing each other. Lauren came back one final time with her sister and a couple boxes. They moved quietly, carefully, like they were trying not to disturb me. I stood near the doorway and watched. Lauren avoided my eyes most of the time. When she did look at me, her expression was unreadable. Not cold, just distant. When they were done, she stood in the living room with her keys in her hand. This was the moment people talk about. The last moment. The goodbye. I waited for her to say something meaningful. Something that would wrap it up, even if it hurt. Lauren looked at me and said, I guess we just stopped trying. Her voice didn't shake. She didn't cry. I nodded because I didn't have an argument. I guess, I said. Another pause. She took a breath like she might say more, then didn't. She walked to the door, hesitated again, and then left. The door clicked shut. And that was it. No dramatic end. No closure. Just quiet. After she left, I sat on the couch for a long time. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't pick up my phone. I just sat there in the silence of a space that had once been us. I looked around and noticed the empty spots where her things had been. The shelf that used to hold her books. The corner where her plant used to sit. The hook by the door where her keys used to hang. It wasn't dramatic, but it felt like walking through a house after a storm. Everything still standing, but something essential missing. Over the next few weeks, people asked questions. What happened? Did you guys fight? Was there someone else? I'd shake my head. No, I'd say. And then I'd struggle to explain the real answer. There wasn't a single thing. There wasn't a betrayal. There wasn't even hatred. It was just effort disappearing. It was waking up and realizing you hadn't kissed your partner in days and neither of you noticed. It was sharing a bed and feeling like there was a wall between you. It was hearing them laugh at something on their phone and realizing you weren't part of that joy anymore. It was saying, I'm tired instead of I miss you. It was saying it's fine instead of it hurts. It was letting days pass without reaching because reaching felt risky. It was love turning into habit. And then habit turning into nothing. Sometimes, late at night, I still look at my phone and think about texting her. Not to get her back. Not to start something again. Just to ask, do you ever think about it? But I don't. Because I don't know what I'd do with the answer. I've seen Lauren once since. At a friend's birthday dinner. A crowded restaurant. Loud enough that we could pretend it wasn't awkward. She looked good. Different. Lighter somehow. We hugged politely. We said, how have you been? Good, she said. Yeah, I said. Me too. We talked for a minute. Nothing personal. Nothing real. Then she got pulled into another conversation, and I let her go. I watched her laugh with someone else, and I felt that old ache, but it was quieter now. Less sharp. More like a scar you forget is there until you brush against it. On the walk home, I tried to remember the last time we truly tried. Not the last time we had sex. Not the last time we went out. Not the last time we did couple things. The last time we sat down and actually chose each other with intention. I couldn't. And that's what I carry with me. Not the breakup. The slow disappearance. The fact that we didn't end because we hated each other. We ended because, somewhere along the way, love stopped being something we did. It became something we assumed. And assumptions don't keep people together. Now my apartment looks different. Not just because the furniture changed, but because the air changed. There's less expectation in it. Less quiet pressure to be okay. I can leave dishes in the sink without feeling like someone is silently keeping score. I can eat dinner alone without pretending it's a temporary phase. Sometimes that feels peaceful. Sometimes it feels like failure. Most of the time, it just feels like life. I don't tell this story because I'm proud of it. I don't tell it because I think it makes me look good. If anything, it makes me look passive. Like someone who watched something valuable slip away and didn't reach fast enough to grab it. But that's what happened. We didn't break up. We just stopped trying. And the worst part is that I don't think either of us even noticed we were doing it until there was nothing left to save. Even now, if you asked me when it ended, I wouldn't know what to say. Because it didn't end in a moment. It ended in 100 quiet moments we let pass. And then one day, She closed the doors softly behind her, and the silence finally sounded like what it was.